Some men are forged by fire. Jae-seong-kwan was carved from ash and ice. Newark's ironbound district knew his name the way shadows know darkness, intimately, without question, without mercy. At 34, he commanded the Korean faction with a reputation that made grown men cross streets and rival bosses reconsider ambitions. Every scar on his knuckles told a story. Every enemy who touched his territory received an answer written in blood. But power couldn't save the one person who mattered. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a February night, cold enough to freeze breath in lungs. His mother, the last thread connecting him to something human, collapsed in their private brownstone. For the first time in 15 years, Jae-seong-kwan felt genuine fear. He didn't dare drive her himself. Too many eyes watched his movements. Too many rivals waited for moments of weakness. So he made the call that would unravel everything he'd built. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. The paramedic who stepped out moved with exhausted grace, amber eyes scanning the scene with professional detachment. She didn't know the man watching from the shadows, didn't know his reputation, didn't know he was about to become her entire world. Ruth Baptiste was simply doing her job. The brownstone on Ferry Street wasn't supposed to exist on any official map, yet Ruth's GPS led them directly to the address. Iron gates. Security cameras angled at every approach, windows dark except for one room blazing with desperate light on the second floor. "This doesn't feel right," Dion muttered beside her, hand instinctively moving toward the radio. Ruth had learned to trust her gut in 5 years working Newark streets. Her gut said someone inside was dying, and that mattered more than whatever illegal enterprise funded the building's obvious wealth. "Grab the kit," she said, already moving. The front door opened before they reached it. A Korean man in his 30s stood in the frame. Expensive suit, cold eyes, hand resting casually near his hip in a way that suggested a weapon. Not the patient. Security. Upstairs. Second door on the left. His English carried barely a trace of accent. "Touch nothing except the patient. See nothing. Say nothing." Ruth's jaw tightened. "We're medical professionals, not criminals. If you're threatening us, I'm protecting you." His gaze shifted past them to the street. "Move. Now." Something in his urgency overrode her anger. Ruth grabbed the medical bag and took the stairs 2 at a time. Behind her, Dion's breathing came fast and nervous. The bedroom stopped her cold. Wealth dripped from every surface, silk curtains, hardwood floors, art that probably cost more than her annual salary. But wealth couldn't mask death's approach. The woman on the bed was small, delicate, her grey-streaked hair spread across pillows like spider silk. Her breathing rattled. Her lips held a bluish tint, and beside her a man sat perfectly still. Ruth's training kicked in automatically, vitals, oxygen, assessment, but part of her remained aware of him. Tall, broader than the security guard downstairs, black hair styled in an undercut white dress shirt with 4 buttons undone, revealing the beginning of intricate ink that crawled up his neck. His face could have been carved from marble for all the emotion it showed. How long has she been unconscious? Ruth knelt beside the bed, fingers already seeking a pulse. 40 minutes. His voice carried the same careful English as the guards, but deeper, smoother, the kind of voice that could order executions or seduce women with equal effectiveness. She complained of chest pain, then collapsed. Medical history? Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, diagnosed 8 months ago. Ruth's hands stilled briefly. Terminal. The oncologist's death sentence. She forced her focus back to work. "We need to transport her immediately. She's in respiratory distress." "No hospitals." The words came flat, absolute. Ruth's head snapped toward him. "Excuse me?" For the first time, his dark eyes met hers. Something flickered in those depths. Not anger, not coldness, but something far more dangerous. Desperation, carefully controlled. "Please," the word seemed to cost him. "I have. Arrangements. A private medical team. They're 20 minutes away. Can you stabilize her until then?" This was insane, against every protocol. Ruth opened her mouth to refuse, to cite regulations and liability and common sense. The woman's hand moved weakly, grasping toward her son. "Jae-seong-ah," she whispered in Korean. So quiet Ruth almost missed it. "Gwenchana, it's okay." His entire body went rigid. The mask cracked for half a heartbeat, raw anguish flashing across his features before iron controls slammed back into place. When he looked at Ruth again, she saw something that made her chest ache. A man watching his last anchor slip away. "I'll stabilize her," Ruth heard herself say, "but if she crashes, we're transporting. No arguments." He nodded once, sharp, decisive. Ruth worked quickly, starting oxygen, checking vitals, administering what she could within her scope of practice. Dion assisted silently, shooting her worried glances she ignored. The woman, soon he, based on the name Jae-seong murmured to her, remained semi-conscious, her breathing gradually steadying under the oxygen mask. "Ruth," Dion's voice was low, urgent. "We should go, now. I know what this is." She adjusted the IV flow. "I also know she'll die if we leave." 15 minutes later, a team arrived, not city paramedics, private physicians with equipment that belonged in surgical suites. They moved with efficiency that spoke of practice, of familiarity with unconventional situations. Ruth briefed them rapidly, professional even as every instinct screamed about illegality and danger and consequences. As they prepared to move Soon-hee to a private facility Ruth didn't ask about, Jae-seong stood. He was taller than she'd realized, broader. The tiger tattoo visible at his collar seemed to move in the low light, black ink rippling across his throat like a living thing. Up close, she could see the scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the calluses on his knuckles, the slight hollow beneath his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "Thank you." He reached into his jacket. "Don't." Ruth stepped back. "I didn't do this for money." His hand stilled. Those dark eyes studied her with unnerving intensity, as if cataloguing every feature, every micro-expression, as if memorizing her. Then why? The question hung between them. Ruth thought of 100 professional answers. Instead, the truth slipped out. Because no one should watch their mother die alone. Something shifted in his expression. Not softness. She doubted this man knew softness. But recognition, perhaps. Understanding. "You're either very brave or very foolish." His hand emerged from his jacket holding a business card. Simple, elegant, just a phone number. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, call." "I won't." Ruth turned toward the door. "You will." The certainty in his voice stopped her. She looked back. He stood framed by the window, city lights casting his face in sharp relief. Beautiful, she realized distantly, and absolutely lethal. "How do you know?" The smallest smile touched his lips, sad, resigned. "Because you saw something tonight. And in this city, seeing things has consequences." He moved closer, and Ruth's training screamed to run even as something else, something stupid, made her hold her ground. "They'll come for you. When they do, call that number." "Who will come for me?" "The men who want what I have. Who think hurting people He stopped, corrected himself. "People who help me will give them leverage." Ruth's heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm not involved in whatever you do. You became involved the moment you walked through that door." His gaze moved to Dion, still hovering nervously near the stairs. "Both of you, I'm sorry." The apology sounded genuine. That terrified her more than threats would have. "Stay alert," Jae-seong continued quietly. "Watch for cars that follow too long. Men who watch too closely. If anything feels wrong, call. I'll handle it. I don't need a criminal protecting me." "No." His eyes held hers. "You need a monster, and that's exactly what I am." Ruth left without another word, Daeon practically running behind her. But as they loaded equipment into the ambulance, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Couldn't forget the way Jae-seong had looked at his mother. Couldn't forget she'd tucked his card into her pocket instead of throwing it away. 3 days passed before Ruth admitted he'd been right. The first sign came Tuesday morning, a black sedan idling across from her apartment building when she left for her shift. She told herself she was paranoid. Newark had thousands of black sedans. The second sign came Wednesday night. The same car, she'd memorized the license plate now, parked 2 blocks from the hospital when she emerged at 4 a.m. Different position, same vehicle. By Thursday, Ruth stopped pretending. "You're being followed." Dion said what she'd been avoiding. They sat in the ambulance between calls, coffee going cold in their hands. That brownstone job. I told you. You think I don't know? Ruth's voice came sharper than intended. I see them, Dion, I'm not blind. So call the cops, and tell them what? A rich Korean man gave me his number, and now mysterious cars follow me. They'll laugh me out of the station. She rubbed her eyes, or worse, start asking questions about that night, about the patient we treated off the books. Dion fell silent. He knew she was right. That night, Ruth's shift ended at 3 a.m. Exhaustion pulled at her bones as she walked to her car, a 10-year-old Honda that protested starting in cold weather. The parking garage sat mostly empty, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. She was halfway to her vehicle when footsteps echoed behind her. Ruth's hand dove into her bag, fingers closing around her keys, positioning them between her knuckles the way her father had taught her. She walked faster. The footsteps matched her pace. Ruth Baptiste. Not a question, a statement. She spun, heart slamming into her throat. Two men stood between her and the exit. Asian, mid-30s. Expensive suits that didn't quite hide the muscle beneath. The one who'd spoken smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We need to talk about your patient from Monday night. Ruth's mouth went dry. I don't know what you're talking about. Liar. The second man moved to her left, cutting off that escape route. How you went to Ferry Street, treated Soon Hee Kwan. We want to know her condition. I'm bound by HIPAA regulations. I can't discuss. Drop the act. The first man's smile vanished. You think medical privacy laws matter here? You treated the mother of our enemy. That makes you involved. Every self-defense class Ruth had ever taken flooded her mind. Run, scream, fight. But her legs felt like lead, and the garage's isolation worked against her. No one would hear, no one would come. I'm just a paramedic, she managed. I don't know anything about... Vincent Chen sends a message. The man stepped closer. Too close. Ruth could smell cigarettes and expensive cologne. Stay away from the Kwan family. Forget you ever met Jae Seong. Or we'll make sure you remember in ways that involve your pretty face and a hospital bed. The threat landed like a fist to her gut. Ruth's fingers trembled around her keys. Then headlights flooded the garage. A car appeared from nowhere, sleek, dark, moving with predatory speed. It stopped between Ruth and her attackers with a precision that spoke of military training. The driver's door opened. Minho Hawk Park stepped out. Ruth recognized him from Monday night. Jae Seong's security, the man who'd opened the door with his hand near a weapon. He looked different now, harder, dangerous in a way that made the two men facing Ruth suddenly seem amateur. Gentlemen. Hawk's voice was pleasant, conversational, terrifying. You're in ironbound territory. That means you're breathing air that belongs to my boss. This doesn't concern you, Park. But the first man stepped back. The woman you're threatening treated Soon Hee Kwan. That makes her under our protection, which means this concerns me very much. Hawk moved with fluid grace, positioning himself beside Ruth. Now you have two choices. Walk away and tell Chen his message was received, or stay and discover why they call me Hawk. The nickname suddenly made sense. Ruth watched him watch the two men with the stillness of a raptor sighting prey, perfectly motionless, utterly focused. The men exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them. Then, without another word, they retreated toward the garage exit. But the first one paused, looking back at Ruth. This isn't over. Actually, Hawk said softly, it is. You just don't know it yet. They left. The garage fell silent, except for Ruth's ragged breathing. Ms. Baptiste. Hawk turned to her, expression neutral. I'm going to escort you home. Your car will be delivered tomorrow morning, fully serviced and secured. I don't... Ruth's voice shook. She hated it. I don't need... With respect. You do. He gestured toward his car. Please, my boss would be displeased if something happened to you. The weight of everything crashed over her. The stalking, the threats, the realization that she'd stumbled into something far beyond a medical call. Ruth's legs finally gave out. She caught herself against her Honda, breathing hard. I just wanted to help, she whispered. I know. Hawk's voice softened marginally. That's why you're in danger. Good people always are. Ruth looked at this stranger, this criminal, let's be honest, and made a decision that would change everything. Take me to him. Hawk raised an eyebrow. Boss doesn't do meet and greets. I don't care what he does or doesn't do. Those men threatened me because I helped his mother. The least he can do is face me. Something like respect flickered in Hawk's eyes. Get in the car. The drive took 20 minutes through Newark's empty streets. Ruth watched city lights blur past, her mind racing. What was she doing? Demanding an audience with a mafia boss? This was insanity, but anger burned through fear. She hadn't asked for this. Hadn't asked to become collateral damage in some criminal empire's power struggle. They arrived at a building in the Ironbound district, a restaurant, closed at this hour. Hawk led her through the main dining room to a private area in back. Jae-seong sat alone at a table, papers spread before him, a glass of whiskey untouched at his elbow. He wore the same white shirt from Monday night, collar open, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The tiger tattoo seemed to pulse in the low light. He looked up as they entered. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. Tension. Anticipation. Ms. Baptiste. He rose smoothly. I hoped you wouldn't need to use my number. I didn't. Ruth's anger found its voice. Your man intercepted me before I could decide whether to call, which means they'd already made contact. Jae-seong's jaw tightened imperceptibly. He looked at Hawk. Vincent's men? 2 of them. Parking garage at the hospital. Made threats. Names? Chen's usual enforcers, Lee and Park. Jae-seong nodded once. The gesture carried weight. A decision made, a sentence passed. Ruth didn't want to know what it meant. You were right, she said, hating how small her voice sounded. They came for me. So what now? What happens to my life? He studied her for a long moment. Then, surprising her, he pulled out a chair. Sit, please. Let me explain what you've stumbled into. Ruth sat. Not because she trusted him, but because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. Jae-seong settled across from her, movements controlled and deliberate. Up close, under better lighting, she could see details Monday night's chaos had obscured. The silver ring on his right hand, engraved with Korean characters. The slight crook to his nose suggesting an old break. The way his dark eyes tracked everything, her breathing, her posture, the nervous way her fingers twisted together. Vincent Chen runs the Chinese faction operating in Newark and parts of Manhattan, he began without preamble. We've maintained an uneasy truce for 5 years. 3 months ago he decided my territory looked appealing. I don't care about your gang war. Ruth's voice came steadier than she felt. I care about why strangers are threatening me in parking garages. They're connected. He reached for the whiskey, reconsidered, withdrew his hand. Chen knows my mother is dying. He sees weakness, opportunity. If he can't destroy me directly, he'll destroy what I... Again, that hesitation. What matters? I'm not what matters to you. I'm a stranger who treated your mother one time. You showed her kindness. Jae-seong's voice dropped, carrying an emotion Ruth couldn't name. In 15 years, no one outside our family has shown Soon-hee kindness. Everyone knows who I am, what I do. They see her as leverage, as a target. His eyes met hers. You saw her as a patient, a human being in distress. Ruth swallowed hard. That's my job. Your job ended when you walked out my door. You could have reported me, called authorities. Instead, you kept quiet. He leaned forward slightly. Why? The question echoed his earlier one. Ruth found herself giving the same kind of raw honesty. Because she looked at you the way my mother looks at me, like you're everything good left in her world, even if the world can't see it. Something cracked in his carefully controlled expression. Pain quickly masked. Soon he deserves better than a son like me. Maybe, but she has you and you clearly love her. That counts for something. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, surprisingly intimate, as if they'd revealed more in these brief exchanges than most people shared in months. I can protect you, Jae-seong said finally, but it requires your cooperation. What does that mean? It means you accept security, drivers, guards at your apartment, someone watching your back at all times. He must have seen her instinctive refusal forming because he continued quickly. I know how it sounds, but Chen won't stop with threats. He'll escalate, and The words seemed to cost him. I can't have your death on my conscience. You're a crime lord. Since when do you have a conscience? Since the moment you told me no one should watch their mother die alone. His gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. You reminded me I'm still human, barely, but enough to want to keep you alive. Ruth's heart hammered. This was insane. Everything about this situation violated sense and safety. But she thought of the sedan following her, the men in the garage, the casual way they'd threatened her face. "How long?" she asked. "Until Chen is handled." "Which means what exactly?" Jae-seong's expression went carefully blank. "You don't want details. If I'm accepting your protection, I deserve honesty." He considered her for a long moment. Then, "Chen has been probing our operations, testing boundaries. The parking garage incident crossed a line. He touched someone under my protection. That requires a response." "Violence?" "Yes." The simple admission shouldn't have affected her, but Ruth appreciated the lack of euphemism. He wasn't pretending to be something he wasn't. "I need to think about this," she said. "You have until tomorrow morning. After that, I'm assigning protection whether you agree or not." He stood, and Ruth realized he'd given her an out, an escape from this conversation before it went deeper. "Hawk will take you home." Ruth rose, turning toward the door. Then she stopped. "Your mother. How is she?" Jae-seong's entire body went rigid. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of mountains. "The doctors give her 3 weeks, maybe 4. "I'm sorry." "Why?" The question came sharp, almost angry. "You didn't give her cancer." "No, but I know what it's like to watch someone you love fade." Ruth thought of her grandmother, lost to dementia 2 years prior. It's the worst kind of helpless. His mask slipped again, just for a heartbeat. In it, Ruth saw devastating grief held behind iron walls. "Go home, Ms. Baptiste. Get some rest. This world isn't meant for people like you." "People like me?" "Good people." He turned away, shoulders rigid. "You still believe in helping strangers. Haven't learned that kindness is just another word for vulnerability." Ruth should have left, should have walked away and never looked back. Instead, she found herself speaking. "You called for an ambulance instead of driving her yourself. That was kind, careful. You were protecting her even in crisis." Jae-seong didn't turn around. "I was being strategic. You were being a son." Ruth moved toward the door, pausing in the frame. "There's a difference between closing yourself off and becoming what you fear. You're not as far gone as you think." She left before he could respond. Hawk drove her home in silence. Ruth's mind spun with everything that had happened. The threats, the revelations, the strange intimacy of that conversation. She barely noticed arriving at her apartment building until Hawk cleared his throat. "For what it's worth," he said quietly. "Boss doesn't let anyone see him like that. Vulnerable. You got past walls men have died trying to breach." "I don't want to get past his walls. I want my normal life back." "That's not an option anymore." Hawk's voice held genuine regret. "You're marked now. Chen knows you matter to Boss, even if Boss hasn't admitted it to himself yet." "I don't matter to him. We've had 2 conversations." Hawk smiled slightly. "You told him his mother looked at him like he was everything good in her world. You saw the man, not the monster. Trust me, you matter." Ruth climbed out without responding, but as she entered her apartment, she couldn't shake his words, or the way Jae-seong's carefully controlled expression had cracked when she'd asked about Soon-hee. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Security detail arrives at 6 a.m. They'll introduce themselves properly. Please don't shoot them." JK, despite everything, Ruth smiled. Then reality crashed back. She was under the protection of a Korean Mafia boss. Men wanted to hurt her to hurt him. Her normal life was gone, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that maybe that wasn't entirely terrible. She silenced that voice, poured herself tea, pretended her hands weren't shaking, pretended she wasn't thinking about dark eyes that held galaxies of pain. 6 a.m. arrived with a knock that could wake the dead. Ruth, who'd managed maybe 3 hours of sleep, stumbled to her door and peered through the peephole. A Korean woman in her late 20s stood in the hallway, professional attire, hair pulled back, eyes that scanned the corridor with trained efficiency. She held up an ID badge. "Kim Soo-jin, licensed security contractor. Boss sent me." Ruth opened the door. "He sent a woman? You're more likely to trust me than another man after last night." Soo-jin stepped inside without invitation, immediately checking windows and sightlines. "Plus, I'm better than most of his men. Don't let the heels fool you." Despite exhaustion and stress, Ruth liked her immediately. "Coffee," Ruth offered. Only if you're making some. Sujin finished her inspection and settled at the small kitchen table. We need to establish protocols. You work 12-hour shifts at Newark University Hospital, usually nights, 3 on, 2 off, correct? How do you— Never mind. Ruth poured coffee. Yes. I'll drive you to and from work. Wait during shifts. Another guard, Marcus, will watch your building while you sleep. Sujin accepted the mug with a nod of thanks. You're not to go anywhere alone. Grocery store, gym, friend's house, I'm with you. This is insane. This is necessary. Sujin's voice softened marginally. Ruth, can I call you Ruth? Chen's people don't make idle threats. You witnessed them once. Boss won't allow a second encounter. What's Jae-seong to you? Ruth asked suddenly. Why do you all follow him so absolutely? Sujin considered the question. He saved my little brother from a trafficking ring 4 years ago, burned the operation to the ground, killed everyone involved, brought Jin-ho home. She met Ruth's eyes. Boss doesn't show mercy often, but when he does, it's absolute. That kind of loyalty runs both ways. Ruth thought of Jae-seong's controlled intensity, the way he'd apologized for pulling her into danger. He doesn't seem like someone who'd run a rescue operation. He's full of contradictions. Sujin smiled slightly. Kills without hesitation when protecting what's his. But every business he runs employs immigrants who can't find legal work elsewhere. Every building he owns rents at rates people can actually afford. He's brutal to enemies and impossibly protective of anyone under his care. You make him sound almost heroic. I make him sound human, which he is under all the ice. Sujin's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned. We need to go. Boss wants to see you. Ruth's pulse jumped. Why? Didn't say, but he's at the hospital with his mother. Newark University Hospital's private wing existed in a different universe than the public emergency department. Quiet halls, expensive art, rooms more like hotel suites than medical facilities. Sujin led Ruth to the 3rd floor, where a subtle security presence suddenly became obvious. Men in suits stationed at strategic points, trying to look casual and failing. Soon Hee's room sat at the end of the corridor. Jae-seong stood at the window, silhouetted against morning light. He wore dark slacks and that same white shirt, 3 buttons undone now, collar loose. The tiger tattoo seemed more vibrant in daylight. Intricate detail, traditional shading. The beast's snarl frozen mid-attack at the base of his throat. He turned as Ruth entered. His expression showed exhaustion, deeper than 3 sleepless nights, the kind that came from years of holding everything together. Ms. Baptiste. He gestured toward his mother's bed. She asked to see you. Ruth's breath caught. Soon he was awake, propped on pillows, oxygen cannula in place. She looked impossibly fragile, but her eyes held sharp intelligence. The kind paramedic, Soon he said in accented English. She smiled. My son told me you came back, to talk about protection. Yes. Ruth moved closer, automatically assessing vitals with a professional eye. Heart rate elevated but stable, color better than Monday night. How are you feeling? Like I'm dying. Soon. He's bluntness startled a laugh from Ruth. Don't look shocked. I know what's happening. The doctors think gentle lies help. They don't. Jae-seong's jaw tightened imperceptibly. I wanted to thank you, Soon he continued, for being kind to my son, for seeing him as human. Mrs. Kwan, Soon he, please. She reached for Ruth's hand. Her grip was weak but insistent. He's been alone so long, pushing everyone away, convinced love is weakness. Her eyes shifted to Jae-seong, filled with maternal worry that transcended circumstances. I won't be here to remind him he deserves happiness, so I'm asking you. Yoma. Jae-seong's voice cracked on the word. Mother, don't. I'm dying, Jae-seong, let me speak. Soon he turned back to Ruth. I know what my son is, what he does. But I also know his heart. It's still there, buried under all that ice. Someone just needs to be patient enough to find it. Ruth's throat tightened. I barely know him. Yet you're here, accepting protection, asking about his mother. Soon. His smile grew sad. That's more than anyone's done in 15 years. The room fell silent. Ruth felt the weight of Soon-hee's words, the impossible request buried within them. She couldn't fix this man, couldn't thaw decades of frozen emotion, but she could see the way his hands clenched at his sides, could see the careful control fraying at the edges. I'll stay until you're settled, Ruth heard herself say. Make sure you're comfortable. Relief flooded Soon-hee's expression. Thank you. Ruth stayed for 2 hours. She adjusted monitors, consulted with Dr. Chen about medication adjustments, and simply sat with Soon-hee while the older woman drifted in and out of sleep. Jae-seong remained at the window, silent sentinel watching the city that bowed to his name. When Soon-hee finally fell into deeper sleep, Ruth stood to leave. Jae-seong intercepted her at the door. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Yes, I did. She's dying. If sitting with her for a few hours brings peace, it's the least I can do. It's more than most would do. He hesitated, and Ruth sensed some internal war. She's not wrong about me being alone. By choice, by necessity. His voice hardened. Everyone I've ever cared about became a target. My father, my brothers, He stopped. Love is a weapon people use against me. So, you decided to feel nothing. I decided to survive. Ruth looked at this man who commanded an empire built on fear, who'd lost everyone except the woman dying in the room behind them. Impulse overrode sense. Coffee. Tomorrow. Somewhere public, neutral, safe, just two people talking. Jae-seong's eyes widened fractionally, surprise breaking through his control. You're asking me on a date. I'm offering human connection to someone who's forgotten what it feels like. Ruth met his gaze steadily. You can say no. The silence stretched. Ruth watched emotions flicker across his usually impassive face. Confusion, longing, fear, and something else. Something that looked almost like hope. 7 a.m., cafe on Market Street, neutral territory. I'll be there. Ruth left before she could second-guess the insanity of what she'd just done. Behind her, Jae-seong stood frozen, staring at the empty doorway as if she'd been a ghost. Or a miracle. The cafe on Market Street served the best Korean fusion breakfast in Newark. Ruth arrived at 6:55 a.m., nerves making her early. Soo-jin had insisted on coming, settling at a table near the window with clear sightlines to the entrance. This is ridiculous, Ruth muttered. This is protocol. Soo-jin didn't look up from her phone. Boss's orders. Jae-seong arrived exactly at 7. Ruth watched him scan the room automatically. Exits, threats, weapons. Hawk appeared from somewhere, taking position near Soo-jin. The two guards exchanged nods. Business as usual. Jae-seong crossed to her table. This morning he wore dark jeans and a black sweater, collar high enough to almost hide the tiger tattoo. Almost he looked younger, more human. Almost normal if you ignored the way everyone in the cafe suddenly found their food fascinating. You came, he said, surprise still evident in his voice. I said I would. Ruth gestured to the seat across from her. Coffee's on me. I own this cafe. Of course you do. Ruth couldn't help smiling. Then coffee's on you. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. He signaled the server, a young Korean woman who appeared instantly, and ordered in rapid Korean. The server bowed slightly and disappeared. What did you order? Ruth asked. Trust me? She considered. In this? Yes. Something shifted in his expression. No one trusts me. Maybe you don't give them reason to. Maybe I don't want to give them reason to. But his voice lacked conviction. Food arrived. Kimchi jeon, steaming bowls of kongnamul guk, freshly baked pastries. Ruth ate, surprised by her appetite. They talked carefully at first. Neutral topics. Newark's gentrification, hospital politics, his mother's condition, which he reported with clinical detachment that didn't fool her for a second. But slowly, carefully, the conversation deepened. Tell me about your family, Jae-seong said. The ones you lost. Ruth hadn't expected the directness. She set down her coffee. My grandmother, dementia took her 2 years ago. Watching her forget me was... She stopped, swallowed. It's like dying twice. Once when they forget who you are. Again when they actually go. He nodded slowly. My father forgot us at the end. The torture broke his mind before it killed his body. The casual way he said it made Ruth's chest ache. I'm sorry. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm saying I understand watching someone disappear. They sat in that shared understanding. Two people who'd learned grief's specific weight. Why did you become a paramedic? He asked. I wanted to save people. Ruth laughed bitterly. Sounds naive now. Sounds noble. It's exhausting. Every shift, someone's worst day. Sometimes I can help, sometimes I just watch them die. She met his eyes. How do you handle it? The violence? The death? I compartmentalize. Separate what I feel from what I do. His voice dropped. Though lately, the walls are thinning. Since your mother got sick. Since I met you. The words hung between them. Ruth's breath caught. Jae-seong looked almost surprised he'd spoken them aloud. I don't understand, she said carefully. Neither do I. He leaned back, jaw tight. For 15 years I've been ice, controlled, untouchable. Then you show up for one medical call and suddenly I'm remembering what it feels like to... He stopped, started again. You asked if I chose isolation. I did. But sitting here, talking about grandmothers and death and trust, I'm remembering why that choice felt necessary. Because this... He gestured between them. This is dangerous. Talking over coffee is dangerous. Wanting to talk over coffee is dangerous. Wanting to see you again after this is dangerous. Wanting... He caught himself. Everything about you is dangerous to me. Ruth's heart hammered. I'm a paramedic. I literally save lives. How is that dangerous? Because I could fall in love with you. The words came raw, honest, terrifying. And everyone I've ever loved has died because of me. The cafe faded. Ruth stared at this powerful man admitting vulnerability like it was a death sentence. Maybe in his world it was. You don't love me, she said gently. You barely know me. I know you asked about my mother when you could have walked away. I know you sat with her for 2 hours yesterday. I know you came here this morning, even though my world is violence and danger and everything you've spent your life healing. His dark eyes held hers. I know enough to know I could. Could what? Fall. The single word carried the weight of surrender. And that terrifies me more than Vincent Chen, more than losing territory, more than dying. Because you're not mine to lose, but I'll destroy you trying to protect what I'm already starting to feel. Ruth should have run, should have recognized red flags and danger, and the absolute insanity of this entire situation. Instead, she reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. What if I'm not as fragile as you think? His hand turned under hers, fingers interlacing. The calluses on his knuckles, earned through violence she didn't want to contemplate, felt rough against her skin. You're mortal. That's fragile enough. So are you. Barely. But his grip tightened. Ruth? Her phone buzzed. Work. Emergency. All hands needed at hospital for mass casualty incident. She swore softly, already standing. I have to go. There's been... I know. Jae-seong was already moving, hand at the small of her back, guiding her toward the door. Soo-jin, get her to the hospital. Fast. Hawk, with me. They moved like a military unit. Within 60 seconds, Ruth was in Soo-jin's car, speeding toward the hospital. She caught one glimpse of Jae-seong in the rearview mirror, standing outside the cafe, watching them go. Looking like a man who'd just revealed his worst fear, looking like a man who knew he was already too late to protect himself. The mass casualty incident consumed Ruth's next 14 hours. Building collapse. Dozens injured. 3 dead. She worked until her hands shook and her eyes burned, saving who she could, comforting who she couldn't. At 11 p.m., stumbling toward the locker room, she found Jae-seong waiting in an empty hallway. You look exhausted, he said quietly. I am. Ruth leaned against the wall. Why are you here? Making sure you're safe. He moved closer. That collapse wasn't an accident. Ruth's blood went cold. What? The building was scheduled for demolition. Someone triggered it early, during occupancy. His voice went hard. Vincent's work, a message. People died because of your gang war. People died because Chen is escalating. Jae-seong's jaw tightened. I'm ending this. Tonight. He won't threaten anyone else. Anyone under my protection. Ruth pushed off the wall, too tired for fear. What does that mean? He looked at her with those dark, devastating eyes. It means I'm about to become the monster everyone thinks I am. It means after tonight you should stay far away from me. And if I don't want to, then you're braver or more foolish than I thought. He reached out, fingers brushing her cheek. The touch was gentle, reverent, completely at odds with the violence he was about to commit. Go home. Rest. Sujin will watch over you. Jae-seong, he kissed her forehead. Brief, chaste, heartbreaking. If you still want coffee after tonight, call me. Then he was gone, disappearing into the hospital's shadows like he'd never existed. Ruth stood alone in the empty hallway, fingers touching where his lips had been, knowing everything was about to change. 3 years later. Ruth finished her shift at 6 a.m., exhaustion comfortable now rather than crushing. She'd cut back to 3 shifts a week, spending the rest of her time running the non-profit she'd founded, a community medical clinic serving Newark's underserved populations, funded anonymously, everyone said. She knew better. Sujin waited by her car, but these days it felt less like protection and more like friendship. Hawk had Marcus's sister's wedding to attend. The guards had become family. Her apartment, significantly nicer now, paid for with legitimate salary from the clinic, greeted her with morning light and coffee already brewed. She smiled. He had a key now. Used it sparingly, but used it. The bedroom door opened. Jae-seong emerged wearing sweatpants and nothing else, hair messy from sleep. The tiger tattoo displayed in all its fierce beauty. He'd been staying over more frequently lately. Sometimes they talked until dawn. Sometimes they just existed together. It was enough. You're early, he murmured, pulling her close. Quiet night. Ruth wrapped her arms around him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Your mother would be proud, you know. How far you've come. He tensed slightly. Soon he had passed 2 years ago, peaceful and surrounded by love. Her death had broken something in him. Ruth had been there to help him pick up the pieces. She'd be proud of you, he corrected, for not giving up on me. I saw who you could be, who you are under all that ice. The ice melted. He pulled back, studying her face with the intensity that still made her breath catch. You melted it. We melted it together. He kissed her then, slow, deep, full of promises and hope, and the future they were building one careful day at a time. Outside, Newark woke to another morning. Inside, 2 people who'd found each other in darkness learned what it meant to build something in the light. Coffee? Ruth asked against his lips. Jae-seong smiled, always,